Well, last week it's very interesting that both the interviewer and the interviewee were born and bred in Ipswich. So that's quite a nice touch, I thought. So today, as I say, we have something completely different in that neither Dayasara or I come from this area. I wouldn't be able to hazard a guess where Dayasara comes from, but that will all be reported to us in due course. I know that's one of the questions. Um, so I've known Dayasara since I first came along to the Ipswich group, the Ipswich Centre. He was not Dayasara at that time, he was still Martin, although he became Dayasara quite soon afterwards. In 2001, he was telling me. And I met him in various different scenarios and locations over the years since then, and we became quite close. In fact, I was very privileged in that Dayasara became my Kalyana Mitra during the interview, during my ordination process. He's been a very good friend of mine. It's also an interesting coincidence that we're both doctors. Although, of course, I have to say that Dayasara is a proper doctor and I am a fake doctor, not having an actual doctorate degree. But anyway, so Dayasara is a doctor too. Anyway, we better get on to the questions that we have been asked to ask. So, turning to Dayasara, very nice to have you here in the studio.
Oh, yeah, it's great to be here. Yes, yes.
So, that's the first question on our little list. So, where are your family roots? And do your family roots still have impact on you in your life today?
Sure, yeah. So, certainly the north of England and predominantly in Yorkshire. So both my parents were from Yorkshire, and they met in my dad's hometown, which was Keighley, which is near Bradford, not too far from Leeds. And my mum was doing her nurse training, and my dad, it was his hometown. And that was in the late 1940s they met, and they got together, and I was I was born in 1954. Yeah, so my dad was from quite a sort of down to earth class family. His parents, he was an only child, so to that extent, I suppose he was a bit better off than the other kids because he was the only one, and he had very loving parents, and his parents worked in wool mills and factories and things like that, and my dad went to work in a wool mill when he was 14, and then was an apprentice engineer from being 16. My mum was from, I'd say, a more kind of lower middle class family, if you like. She was from the countryside in Yorkshire, and her mum was a school teacher, and her father he had his own little business doing taxiing when there weren't many cars around, of course, in the 1930s and 40s, and then ran a village shop. Apparently, he wasn't a great businessman. He loved reading and meeting people, but he wasn't that great at. I think people said sometimes he let people run up quite big bills at the shop, and he wasn't very insistent on them paying up and that kind of thing. But he was a lovely chap. And my mum was the youngest. She went to work in a children's home when she was 16 and was very interested in child development and all sorts of things to do with children, and did some training on that, and did some courses at Durham University, and then went into nursing and often looked after children. So she was very interested in things to do with children. She said it was quite a big shock, having got all the theory of bringing up children, to have this child that cried all the time and wouldn't sleep and wouldn't eat anything. This is me. So, but she said I was all right once I could sort of start talking to people, and she said I seemed not to like being a baby. I was kind of. I've got a brother who's 2 years younger. He was more kind of placid as a child, but a bit more sort of a bit more of a boisterous teenager, I would say, of the two of us. So, you know. My mum also said that when I was about 3, I was definitely the most kind of noise dominant kid around in any group of children. But then I went a bit quieter, and then I sort of stayed rather quiet for a long time. But curiously, I don't know whether my work in care sector and that, or being a Buddhist or other things, I seem to become more outgoing as I get older. You know, so. Yep. One feature of my childhood is we moved quite a lot because my parents ran a youth hostel, and then that one closed, and they ran another one, and then they decided to move. We moved to Blackpool, so we went into Lancashire, and one stage we were living up above a doctor's surgery where my mum was the practice nurse in a flat. Sort of. Remember pandemonium outside one night because the Beatles were playing at the theatre at the end of our street, you know, so that was quite a memory. And Morecambe and Wise would be there and people like that. So we were, you know, despite the big change between being in the countryside and being in Blackpool, but we kind of loved that really. And then went to school run by the Irish Christian Brothers. So, you know, that wasn't my perfect, it wasn't the ideal school for me in some ways, but, you know, I'm grateful to have had a reasonably good education, I would say, from that. You know, certainly sometimes in the care sector, you meet people who are very able, but just have missed out on that basic education, I think. And, you know, that does hold them back sometimes. Very much liked anything to do with literary things and history. That was the kind of stuff I liked at school. Was planning to go and study that, and then various things. I took a gap year and then went and did some care work in London, and was very chuffed to be in London and started to enjoy the care work. So did a year of a degree, an English degree, and decided actually I'd rather do the care things, you know. So I went off and did that originally in a big old asylum for people with learning disability up back in Lancaster, which at the time seemed okay. Looking back on it, it was quite a strange environment. You know, you talk about the old asylums with 1,000 people in there and all that, and you know, it sounds like something from another era altogether, which of course it is. I'm 67 now, but and then somebody persuaded me to go and do general nurse training, so I did that, and then I went to London to do mental health work. Always been very into work, actually. I've always been a bit of a workaholic. That's been one of my characteristics. So these are aspects of my background, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you still have connections with those northern roots?
Yeah, I go and see friends up there, and keep in contact with a number of friends up in the north. Yeah, so it turned I did make friends in my 20s, and which was good, you know. Yeah, I think I certainly into nursing with quite a high vocational aspect, you know, and I try to retain those ideals as the years go by, but I guess perhaps at some point I think I needed something more for my values, you know. So it was very good to become a Buddhist, you know. And I was a bit shocked in the early days that, I mean, generally in the health service, people do a pretty good job and they crack on with the work. But you know, sometimes you do see, you know, people just come in. I'm going to do my bit, then I'm going to get out of here, and that kind of thing. And I, you know, funny sort of way, I wanted to be really committed to the job and really do it full blast. I'm not saying I always exemplified the best possible behaviour when I was quite young. I was 21 when I started. Well, I was 19 when I started in care work, and obviously I had a lot to learn about life and people, as I still have a lot to learn. But yeah, it was. I think I was quite keen to experience life a bit more as well. You know, I thought, well, you know, going more into the academic world is one thing, but you know, you're a bit isolated from, you know, the nitty gritty of life, and I wanted more of that. You know.
What about when did you develop this interest in elderly care that led to the research that led to your doctorate?
Well, that came a bit later on. I mean, I sort of saw my parents struggling with their health and things like dementia. People started talking more about that and meeting more people who had dementia or who had relatives with dementia and that kind of thing. And just seeing that as a major area. I mean, it's great that most of us on this screen, well, we'll most of us will live to a pretty good age, but there are the downsides to that, that sometimes we're not in the best of health, are we, as the years go by. So we can expect a lot more years of health, but perhaps not ideally we've got that with plus good health, but quite often we do need some support as the time goes by.
Mm.
And I'm kind of hoping that we may be able to um, have more care projects within the Tree Ratner and within Buddhism in general.
So you're not actively working in nursing anymore, are you? But you're still very
No.
involved in trying to push forward this project for elderly care.
Yeah, yes. Well, it's something I'm very interested in, and I keep in contact with, say, some older members a couple of older members who are in care homes, and other people who've got various needs. And I had a tiny little care company for a while, and that did involve helping, supporting a relative of somebody who was around the centre at that time. And also just keeping it, quite often people do contact me from here and there. I've been in contact with him from Germany. He ran his own care company and he wants to be ordained in due course and seems a very good chap. And he's going to come and be the cook at Vajraloka for the summer while the main cook gets ordained. So I hope to go and see him and get a few more ideas from him.
Mm.
A man called Christian. But yeah, other people contact me, and I do a newsletter every 3 months, which I highly recommend, by the way. So if
Yes,
you're not on the
very good.
list, yeah, yeah.
So that's your very altruistic work background.
Mm.
When did you first come into contact with the Dharma and with Triratna, and how did you get involved?
Yeah. So I had been interested in Buddhism for a long time, and I can even remember as a child thinking there was something fascinating about Buddhism. But sometimes I'd read something about Buddhism and think, "Oh, that sounds great." I think sometimes if I read something saying, "Well, Buddhists say that everything is suffering," I'd think, "Oh, that doesn't sound all that good." But I think sometimes either that was being misunderstood or misrepresented in some way. But so I gradually found out that, well, to me, Buddhism just try and face suffering head on, but certainly not saying that that's the whole of life by any means. I found it released a lot of joy and a lot of positivity for me. But yeah, so I was interested as time went on. Thinking of my years in Lancaster. Later there is a group around Lancaster now, but I think I would have been there. Very quickly if there'd been a group meeting
Mm.
there then. Through my years in London, I was doing shift work, that kind of thing. As an excuse, isn't it? Never got to classes. I had a girlfriend, somebody I worked with, and then we were together as a couple for a time. And she'd gone to the Buddhist Society. She was a great woman, is still a great woman, I'm sure, but I haven't seen her for a while. But she used to say, "Well, Buddhism's a wonderful set of principles, but you can't really put it into everyday practice." So I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. I mean, lovely woman, but a bit of a pessimist, I would say, if I dare say. Whereas perhaps I'm a bit more of an optimist. I thought, well, that sounds very interesting. And
So that was the Buddhist Society in Eccleston
yeah,
Square, was
that's
it?
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So she'd gone there quite regularly for quite a
Yeah.
while, and I kind of knew FWBO as it was then was different to the Buddhist Society. And when I moved to Colchester, I decided I got a job teaching nurses in Colchester, and I didn't really know many people in the area, and I didn't know anybody in the town at all. And I thought, might meet some like-minded people. and even meditation might help me or whatever. I was finding the teaching a bit stressful, and I was fascinated more than anything else. I think I was fascinated by wanting to just know about Buddhism in general.
Yeah.
So I'd not only been in Colchester for a few weeks, and I rang the London Buddhist Centre, and they said, "Oh, well, there is somebody doing classes in Colchester, a order member called Harsha Prabha." And they said, "No, there's this other chap who you can phone who has information on it." And I rang this number. I think it was a 151 number, I seem to remember. And it was Bodhi Vangsa, who hadn't then been ordained, but so he was the first person I spoke to. And it was a Wednesday, and he said, "Oh, well, come to the class. Why not come to the class? So there I was. I was off.
You're off.
Yes.
In at the deep end.
Yeah, indeed. And I got there and had a chat with Bodhi Vangsa, and then Harsha Prabhu was commuting from London at that time, and it was very friendly, very positive. As I say, I wasn't quite sure with the meditation. I had a bit of a view that I have too active a mind to really meditate. My mind jumps about all over, and I'm actually going to be able to meditate. But I have meditated now for 31 years, so I hope it's had some effect.
Kept at it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you came. So that was the first time you really came into contact with the Dharma in Colchester, then, in the Colchester.
Pretty
Centre.
much. Actually, when I was doing mental health, I don't know if this is when I was doing mental health training in London. There was a lady there who I think she was from Thailand, and I was working in mental health, and she'd been admitted. She was in quite a strange state of mind.
Yeah.
And she was married to a European guy. He was actually Irish, and they used to go to the Thai temple in Wimbledon. And I remember New Year's Day, it must have been 1981. This group of monks arrived on the ward to see her and to wish her well. And I just remember at some point they just suddenly burst into a chant, and I thought, oh, that's good. And then I remember they wished everyone, Happy New Year. And there was it was a very positive vibe from them. And I suppose that would be, I think quite often, you just have a slightly random meeting with somebody who might be a Buddhist or who is a Buddhist, and it can have an effect. Yeah.
Well, as we know, Triratna very much focuses on friendship. Which we know as Kalyana Mitrata, either formal as in a particular relationship or just in general that form of friendship. So is that a large part of your experience and your practice of the Dharma? How does that play a part in your life, Kalyana Mitrata?
Yeah, well, there's a few things there. I mean, friendship's always been an important thing for me in general, so although I've had a number of relationships over the years, I've never had a sort of live-in partner and not had children. So friendship's been an important thing for me. And I've managed to, keep going with my non-Buddhist friends predominantly. A few have faded away for different reasons, but yeah, I mean, I could sense that there was an emphasis on getting to know people and getting into a bit more depth with people and that kind of thing. So that was certainly there in the early days. I suppose perhaps sometimes I thought the people who were really into it perhaps were some of the younger guys were a bit full on and a bit, even sometimes a bit angry. And I thought, I was only in my mid-30s, but I was that bit older than some of them. And I thought, oh my goodness, they seem a bit full blast, I'd sometimes go and talk to the people who are more to the margins. But I think at some point I kind of started to think, well, I think I need to really, I really want to take this as far as I can. And I need to connect with the people who are really wanting to take it a long way. I mean, I think, obviously people come across classes and come across Triratna and have to work out what level of involvement they want. And it's important that people do that, But so at a certain point, I was invited to move to Ipswich and live in a community. And so that was, it wasn't a huge adventure, just moving 17 miles up the A12, but at the same time, it was quite a big thing for me giving up my flat and eventually giving up that job as teaching nurses and going back to hands-on nursing. That was a bit, what we say is a going forth. But certainly that was based on friendship, so that time. So I moved into a community where there was Sadharaja, Yana Mitra, and another chap who became Harsharatna. And then we got a bigger house and we had more people living there. And I lived at that second house for 11 years and got to know some of those people very well. And I got to know Swadipa well. Yeah. So, yeah, certainly friendship is a crucial thing. And of course, the friendship is not always just massaging each other's ego. Sometimes we do we do get in quite intense debate about things. That's certainly true living in a community. Where there's all sorts of things to rub up against each other with in terms of using the facilities and tidying the place up, and just keeping the ship floating along. You might say,
Yeah, I think that community living is quite a challenging exercise of Kalyana Mitrata, isn't it?
It can be, yes. So, I don't know if people know Chantry Park, and if you ever go up there, where the main gates are, the house just to the left, that's where we had our community for 11 years. And I've sometimes looked at that house and I thought, I think I've experienced every conceivable emotion in there, from from great joy to great despair.
Yeah.
But mostly, I was very glad I did it. Yeah, I was very glad I did it. And I lived there with, I think it was either 15 or 16 people over a period of time, over that 11 years. And sometimes some of the children of some of the people would come and stay for weekends, and many other visitors, Yeah. So,
and you've continued to engage with many people in the Sangha, of course, haven't you, since then?
well, I hope so. Yes, and various things. So I've been back doing Mitra study for a while, and very good to see the Mitra study group here. Most of the people I'm studying with each week are here tonight, and just getting to know people through all the means. I was very pleased actually yesterday to just somebody who's a Mitra who's not been around for a while, and I just sent him an email the other day, something I knew he was interested in, and he came back and said, "Oh, he'd like to meet up." So that was encouraging to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, you do enjoy meeting up with people and chatting.
Yeah. Chatting is. I do get feedback about occasionally talking a bit too much. So one of my defenses is my parents were very chatty, and which isn't supposed to be a characteristic of people from Yorkshire, but they're often said to be rather silent and choose their words rather carefully. But my parents weren't quite like that,
Yeah. Of course, you have a vast variety of words to choose from, as you're very broadly educated, aren't you? You have a fund of knowledge.
Well, I do have a strange mind. I mean, physically, I do look quite like my dad, but my mum had quite a very retentive memory. And I mean, the other week, last week actually, Yana Mitra and I were watching an old film called A Town Like Alice, which actually Yana Mitra's grandfather wrote the script for that film. By the way, there's a plug for Yana Mitra. So if you ever see the film, William Lipscomb did the script based on a novel, but he had to truncate it. But my dear mum, if she'd been there, she wouldn't only know who was playing the main part, who was playing every other actor, and she'd have, she would have read the book, and she was just like that. She just loved to know about stuff, particularly in those kind of fields of films and books, and that was just her thing, Yeah,
and you've sort of inherited that in terms of
yeah,
your interest in Shakespeare and Dickens?
yeah. That's right. Yeah. So I went. I had a close friend at school who wanted to be an actor and became an actor. In fact, he never really broke through to the big time or anything, but he was a dear friend and still is. I spoke to him on Tuesday night, and so we started going to a lot of theatre performances, and And yeah, so over the years, and you know, I just was noticing quite often the themes in Shakespeare around actions having consequences and things like that. And also, Shakespeare does seem to know that animals have emotions. He does. He really does. You know, and nobody else. I have it on good authority that nobody else of his time seemed to think that. You know.
So you thought you'd write a book?
Yes, yes. Well, the book is being slowly written. It's a 3-volume thing. So something's on ethics, some things on meditation, some things on wisdom. But and I've got I don't know if some people might know Amrita, who's a lovely order member up in Norwich. So he's a professional artist, and he's done some of the illustrations for me. They're in a slightly cartoon style. Yeah.
So the final, well, the penultimate question, actually. So can you think of a particular episode or two from your Buddhist life that has made a particular impression on you, something that's really stuck with you?
Yeah. Well, a number of things. I can think of things in terms of individual experiences, and sometimes things that are more collective. I think I remember early times of going to Padmaloka, and I remember they'd spent the morning reading about Buddhist views of the cosmos and all that, and to what extent they're mythic and to what extent they're to be taken literally. And the actual material didn't make such a big impression on me, but I can just remember walking down the lane towards the Ted Ellis Nature Reserve, you know, a very lovely place down there. And I can remember just looking over at these trees. I think we've been advised to do a bit of reflection and maybe go to a reflection place each day on this retreat. And I just had this really strong feeling that my world was expanding, you know, in a way that it never had before. So just a feeling that, you know, this is a much bigger project and a much bigger universe than I'd ever imagined, and that was very encouraging. And I think on a in terms of it's been great just being around the sangha, and you know, sometimes when there's lots of us at the centre for a mitra ceremony or a festival or an event, that's really can be really delightful.
Yeah.
Um, Linking a little bit with Shakespeare, so I'm not making any comparisons whatsoever, but, but I have dared to do some little dramatized plays about Shakespeare, about Buddhist stories. And I remember we did one about Shariputra and Moggallana, these two great pals who met up with the Buddha. And I can remember Andy playing a part in that, and Jamie, and that was good fun. You know, that was good fun, and that was a nice way to get it across. You know, and I know Ari Navata's been in one or two of the players as well, and other people on the screen.
Yeah.
And Paul's been a narrator for those, you know.
I think they rival Ernie Wise's productions.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I mean, another play was based on the this chap who'd been going around the villages of India, um, imitating a dog, you know, and this was seen as quite an admirable thing. You know, it's a hard life to go around being a dog, so the man must have something going for him. And his friend went around pretending to be an ox, you know, and when they met the Buddha, they were asking the Buddha, "What do you think?" And the Buddha didn't want to burst their balloon too much, so and, you know, he waited till they asked him 3 times, and then he said, "No, no, I'm sorry, but that's not going to get you anywhere." You know, so they then became followers of the Buddha. But again, that was quite a good thing. I think Ari Navata was the Buddha in that one. Yeah, and, yeah, so I mean, those fun things, but you know, again, we've got that. But you know, lovely to be at the centre sometimes and just have a puja, have a meditation,
Yeah.
have a, you know, create a lovely atmosphere, and um, yeah, you know, sometimes just just you know, a devotional evening or a meditative evening when you just feel once you're moving into a bit of a different realm of being. That's lovely when that happens.
Okay. But here you are. Finally, do you have any sense, where do you feel that things are going to, how you're going to develop over the next few years? Do you have any sort of idea about that?
Well, there's a few things on the go. So, I've been asked to do some further, take on some more responsibility, and we're looking at that at the moment. Be interested to see what happens with the care things as the time goes on. I'll be continuing doing the study, I hope. Continuing with my own meditation and practice, and reveling in the Sangha, so
Great.
just more of the same, really, but with a few additional things, along the way, no doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dayasara.
Thanks for the questions, Swadipa.
I think we can open it to the floor now.
Yeah.
I think that if Mark or Birdie Vanksa can sort of identify the questioners and pass them through to us, I can't really do that from here.
Okay, I will do that. So if anybody's got a question, please raise your hand for Swadipa, or you can raise your hand via Zoom, or just put your hand up. Andy.
Hello, Dayasara. Good evening, Swadipa.
Hiya.
Lovely to see you both. My question is, Dayasara, what advice would you give to anyone wishing to join the order?
It's a good question. Well, I would recommend it. I'd recommend it. Certainly, it certainly does move you forwards as a Buddhist, I think, definitely. And yeah, I think it takes you into a bigger Sangha, a network of spiritual brothers and sisters, really. And it's, at its best, it's absolutely wonderful. And we have our ups and downs with things, but it's a wonderful thing, And so I obviously, if somebody was thinking of asking for ordination, it's a good idea to get a good picture of what that entails and have a conversation with a few people. But I would recommend it. Yeah.
Thank you, Dayasara.
My pleasure, Andy. Yes. I can see Ivan is.
Hi. Yeah, very interesting interview. Thank you. So I was wondering, do you have a particular sutta resonates with you? What is it and why?
Right, that's a good one. Yes. One that's interested me in recent times is in Bante's book on the Noble Eightfold Path. He mentions a man called Talaputo, or the name's slightly rendered differently, but he's a kind of showman and puts on popular entertainments that seem to be rather, they're not particularly uplifting. And again, the Buddha, he goes and asks the Buddha, what will be the outcome of this? And when he pushes the Buddha a bit, he says, I don't think it's going to be good. No, it's, you'd be better doing something else, really. And I've recently found that same character, Taliputo, is in the another part of the Dharma. I think it's the Teragati. I think it's Teragati. There's one's about some of the women talking about their experience of being followers of the Buddha. One is the men, and but this character Talaputo is talking about how difficult, over the years he found it difficult to change his way of life, but now he absolutely loves meditation, and he loves meditating in the forest, and he absolutely revels in that. And so that's a sutra I'm trying to get to know better. Also, very fond of the things like the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, with lots in it, and often we use that at Parinirvana Day. One more one is where a chap who's been a king, and then he's sort of stepped down and handed on his kingship to somebody else, and the other monks hear him saying, "Oh, what bliss! Oh, what bliss!" And he thinks this must be that he must be reminiscing about his wonderful life as a king. But when they ask him, he says, "No, no, I was glad to hand on being a king." You know, there's all this intrigue and people. There's lots of rivalry and backstabbing and all that, and that's very nicely. The king's called Badia. That's very nicely expressed as well. So that's another one.
Very Shakespearean, that one.
Again,
like
it
one of
is
his
absolutely,
tragedies.
yeah, the hollow crown, you know, and all that. Definitely, definitely. So that's actually going in my little book, you know. So. And in fact, there's an illustration of him saying that. Oh, what bliss! Oh, what bliss! And with a couple of monks walking by with a big question mark above them. Oh, yeah, what's he? What's he
what
doing?
light from yonder window breaks?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
My pleasure, Ivan. Yeah, thanks.
Super.
So thank you, Dayasara,
Uh-huh.
for sharing. Now, the bit I was really interested in was your 11 years in community,
Yeah.
in which you experienced great joy and great despair. And I was just wondering whether you could share with us any particular experiences that you felt helped your spiritual path, that were transformative, that you changed because of that probably quite intense life in community.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, no, good question. I often think of the shrine room we had there, which, you know, it was lovely to be able to have a shrine room in the bottom part of the house, and I often think of it there and some of the devotional things we did there for particular reasons. So that in itself was very good. Certainly some of the friendships that were developed over the years there. And one of the people I lived with, I hadn't seen for about 10 years, and then I just happened to see him in town by accident, you know, and we had a good conversation, you know. So other people I'm in more regular contact with. I think on the one hand, there's a risk sometimes of over idealizing what a community can be like, you know, because of course you've got a lot of the basic human things of, you know, nobody did the washing up, or, you know, whatever, you know, there's all those kind of things, or debates about whose turn it is to clean up and all that. But, you know, most of the time you go beyond that, I think. And, you know, you do get a bit more of a sense of what, you know, what people are like. And a lot of it is very, very positive, you know. I think to really get to know people well, I suppose you need to either live with them or work with them or spend a lot of time with them, you know, and living with people is certainly one way of doing it, you know. Yeah.
Thanks, Dayasara.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure, Shiva, yeah. Also, we had some good social events there as well, you know, with the Sangha. We used to have these bonfires over the Sangha festival weekend, and often we'd have a bonfire there, and you know, people would sometimes bring their families, and we'd meet those people, you know, and we see a bit of a bigger perspective on those people, and then all being well, we'd do the festival the next day, and that was a highlight I used to like, and some of the other events we used to have like that, you know. Yeah.
They were indeed excellent.
Well, yes. And so yeah, I had about 2 and a bit years at the first house we had, and then it was a rented house. Then we got the house for 11 years, and I've been at Yana Mitra's for 12 years now, the house that Yana Mitra owns, and that's been very good. So I've had about 26 years of living with Buddhists, and again, I recommend it. One random thing, by the way, the day I moved to Ipswich, I don't think there's any particular football fans other than perhaps Harry Nevada, definitely Harry Nevada, but the day I moved to Ipswich was in
He
March.
supports Ipswich.
Yeah. The day I moved to Ipswich, which was in March 1995, Ipswich had the misfortune of the football team went to play Manchester United and got beaten 9-0. Some have seen that this was me bringing misfortune, but I say no, they've done better in every match they've played since I arrived. So. Sorry, a bit of frivolity there, but
Excellent.
I think it's also one reason why I've enjoyed really engaging with a particular town as well. Because as I say, we did move quite a lot when I was a child, and then I've moved quite around quite a bit as an adult. So it's been nice to just be in the one place. And it is one of the trends around the centre. In the early days, as Swadipa said, a lot of the people around the centre weren't from the area, which was fine. But it's been great to, have more people around the centre who are born and bred in Ipswich and really know the area very well. That's to me, that's a great thing.
Paul Atkin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Dayasara and Swadipa. The sense I get from what you've been saying is that cultivating positive relationships with people is at the very core of your spiritual practice. Am I correct in saying, in receiving that impression?
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, and that's obviously, you're forming those relationships with individuals who can be very different and they respond to different things, and so it's perhaps it's an art rather than a science, isn't it? You could say, but perhaps there's a bit of science, but it's predominantly, I don't know, something one learns through doing it, I hope. And yeah. Again, I don't know whether this would. I don't know if you want to say any more on that, Paul. But
well, I was just reminded of the Buddha saying that friendship was the whole of the spiritual life.
Yeah, indeed, and I mean that is it's a huge statement, that, isn't it? Which can be interpreted a number of ways, but yeah, certainly making that really big emphasis. That really the quality of your relationships with people and friendships are just so important. I mean, one thing I will just say, this is maybe slightly different to what Paul's asking, but one thing I did find, though, actually, with doing the Metta Bhavana and mindfulness of breathing and still doing my nurse education job, I did find sometimes I got a bit more... I didn't find myself getting softer with the students. They're quite the opposite, in fact. Sometimes I was asking more from them, and because I remember I happen to remember it was 1994. We had a new intake of students, and some of them were quite rowdy, and particularly we're teaching them in big groups. You get a little group who'd be chatting away and making a lot of noise, and the other students couldn't always hear what was being conveyed, and when I started sort of asking them to shut up, essentially, I found other students were coming to me saying, "Oh, great, I wish somebody's telling those, those, because we can't hear a thing, And I thought there was an interesting thing, sometimes there can be an impression that being a Buddhist is floating around being very soft and very lenient with everybody. But in another way, I think if you get a bit more confidence about what you're doing, part of it can be saying, whoa, there's a limit here, please, and also just briefly, some of my colleagues said, well, they're adults, if they don't want to learn. But I thought, well, no, that doesn't quite work. Some of them are nominally. I mean, they're generally we had very good students, but some of them are only nominally adults. They do need to be told to pipe down. So that's the memory I have. That it changed me sometimes in ways I might not have anticipated. Yeah.
So Mitra study, we've got to be on our guard then.
Well, indeed, yes. It's,
we don't want a cane on the back of the hand.
You don't have to do any exams or anything. But yes, well, genuinely, we have got a group of adult learners there who are, very accomplished and wonderful. But we have. It's a good group.
Generally.
But it is. I mean, I do find that sometimes. I did find sometimes there was an ideology that students above the age of 18 should be able to do whatever they wanted, particularly when they were in a learning situation, in a classroom situation. And I thought, well, that's nonsense. Some of the time, hopefully most of the time you can apply that, but it doesn't work all the time.
Any other questions for Dayasara? Oh, I think that's been a really interesting evening.
Wow.
I've known Dayasara over a number of years, but there were things there that I wasn't aware of. Every time we hear a bit more from his very varied and interesting background. Didn't mention going to Canada, but that was another thing that could have come in. So from my point of view, here at Radio Sandhurst.